No, he just wanted a picture of Dad, and these are some of my favorite pictures of Dad. This was Dad as a fair director.
This one in the middle?
I remember that.
You're right. Again, these are just some of the neat pictures we have of him, but this is with Garrett. Okay? Again, Garrett was 1 year old when he died. This is Dad and Garrett over here in the corner as he is holding him. This is Spencer, Heidi, and Garrett right there.
Weren't they cute?
This was a cradle that has been passed down from generation to generation.
And the Schmitz, Carol,
yep.
me,
and this is Dad holding Garrett.
dancing.
That was Dad and Mom when Joni and I got married. Again, this is just an example of the pride that Dad had in his eyes as far as I was concerned, looking at Garrett and trying to figure out what he would turn into. And that's my grandmother on the Lottie side. They're on the Bonn side, I'm sorry.
So we talked about your father.
Yes, sir.
What was his name?
Roland.
Okay, and your mother?
Vera.
Okay, and how did they meet? Do you know?
Basically, that kind of messed up my whole life too in regard to dating and everything, because the first date they ever had was with each other. Okay, and I thought that was the way it was supposed to be, you know. So I had a date with this young lady, and I thought, well, that's it. You know, I'm going to wind up marrying her, and it wasn't Joni. But again, it was a weird deal, or I had a lot of antiquated ideas in my mind in regard to that. But
you're a product of your environment. And that's what you do.
That's what it was. You know, so that was a given. But again,
they both lived in Fredericksburg.
Yeah, and
what was her maiden name?
Well, let me slow down just a second and try and.
Yeah.
They, Dad went to Morris Ranch again the first 8 years, then he transferred over to high school and began playing football, and he was really a good athlete. In fact, it was funny that the first game he ever saw, he was in. He played in it. He did, and they asked him, what do you want to play? And he what do you want to play? I don't know what you're talking about. You know, he said, well, you can either be on the line, you know, or you can be a back. And he said, well, a back, I guess. And they said, well, quarterback? And said, well, what are the options? And they said, well, there's a quarterback, a halfback, and a fullback. And he said,
there's
well,
a lot of backs.
A quarterback, he said, that sounded pretty dinky, you know, but a fullback didn't want to go there. So he wound up being a halfback all his life. And that was just, again, one of those things that the life has worked out for me a lot like that too. Just so many little things in there have changed my entire life. I know I was going to major in agricultural education for a while, agricultural engineering.
Well, that would be logical, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and it made sense. But a guy that I met at a beer party that night was doing that, and he was taking a real hard lab. And I thought, I don't need that, you know.
Do something easy, like math.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I turned out to major in mathematics, but that caused me to change that one statement, and changed my life so dramatically.
And your mother was
I'm sorry. Yeah, Mom was a hanky, and again, that was a
famous family.
Yeah, really was some amazing people involved in that. I never did know my grandfather on her side. He died when I wasn't. She was like 10, I think, when he died. So the only grandfather reference I had was over on my dad's side. But he was, again, his brothers, I'm sorry, his name was Walter, whose dad was William, and William's brother had a son, I'm sorry, who became well known as one of the players on the A&M football team that won the national championship, and that was really cool. Then his sister, that same Willie was his name, his sister was the mother of Admiral Nimitz. So that was pretty cool heritage here on that thing. And so I had some great family on my mother's side, and then an excellent family on dad's side. They were in the Hereford business, and as such was really fortunate to grow up on a large ranch.
And so, how far back do you know in terms of generations of?
Well, yeah, they actually were one of the ones that came up here and settled. Dad's name was Roland. His dad's name was Chester. Then before Chester came Richard, and before Richard came Peter. And Peter was one of the ones that came over on the boat and everything.
Do you know where they landed?
In Indianola up there.
Now you better explain for future generations who go, India, what?
Oh, they'll know.
It's not there anymore.
Just tell them, look the dang thing up. It's right by Galveston. The group that originally was assigned to bring all the German settlers over promised them all kinds of stuff. You got land awaiting for you. We'll have transportation to this area called Central Texas, and everything will be cool. And they took a boat over, which apparently was an amazing trip. I mean, it was phenomenal how long that boat took to get from Europe over to America. And then they landed down there on the coast, and you can imagine what that was like, at a place called Indianola. And it was a little island, and they, it was Joni getting another cup of wine, I think. But anyways, they landed there, and they were totally, nothing was there. In other words, none of the guides that were supposed to take them, none of the wagons, just nothing. And then, so they hired supposedly Mexican carts they borrowed from Mexico, from the Mexicans there, and took all their belongings and went through that swampy land. You can imagine what Galveston was like before the highways were there, you know, how swampy and tough that country is to go through. And then they came up here and were given some land, but not near as much as they were originally promised. And then had to fight the Indians and everything, and just an amazing group of settlers that made it through there. I'm so proud of the ancestry there. And again, a big fan of Herman Lehman, a guy captured by the Indians. 9 years with the Indians he spent. And my grandfather actually met him. So at the fairgrounds out there, he was able to see him, and they said he was so tough that he could take a coal out of the fire, hold it up and light his cigarette, and then put it back down again.
So he had been captured by the Indians,
yeah.
And then he was repatriated, I guess. So the army
well,
came
he
and got
spent
him or
9
something?
years with them, and he didn't want to come back. He liked the Indian life so much at that point. The Indian boys had it made. They really did, in my opinion. You could approach life as a German settler, where you came over here and worked your proverbial tail off as a child, you know, and that's what they did. They hauled rocks out of the field and worked from sunup to sundown, you know, and it was manual labor. I mean, they didn't have the plows or anything, and yet from the other aspect, here was your Indian boy, and the Indians had it rough on the women. The women did everything. All the men did was go, they hunted, they supplied the supplies, but they rode horses, learned how to hunt, shoot, and bring home the game, learned tracking, making arrowheads, raiding other camps. They moved along as the seasons progressed and saw a different country in its prime, in the season that they were supposed to, like the salmon. They'd be at the salmon runs, and then buffalo, and they got to do that. So you compare that life as growing up and riding horses all day with the life of the German boy who busted his butt working for a living plowing the field, you know, and
It was
no
a
contest, you know.
totally different.
Oh yeah,
Lifestyle.
I'm going with the Indians, you know, because the women really did all the work in an Indian camp.
And there's a great statue in Fredericksburg of Moisevach on
Yeah.
his knee
Right.
with the peace pipe.
Well, that was supposedly one of the only treaties that's never been broken, is the Moisevach Treaty with the Indians, and that would be a lot to do with the German community themselves, that they were that disciplined and those good of guys. When they said something, you could count on it, and the Indians finally learned that, and that was the only group that got together. But again, the Indians, it was such a clash of cultures because the Indians, you know, they didn't know what the white men were, and the white men, as they got together, the sad part was the Indians kept moving west as the white men came in. But they clashed with the worst of the white men going into Indian territory with the worst of the Indians coming back to meet them. Okay, so it was the bad guys from both sides. Okay, and that was the saddest part, was both of them were pretty corrupt in that bunch, because each one was trying to wipe the other out, and the more you could torture your enemy, and it was terrible, some of the things that both sides did to each other, but they were trying to prove a point. Yeah.
Now, Civil War in Fredericksburg was not the way it was
Yeah.
in the rest of the country either. Fredericksburg was different.
Yeah, Fredericksburg was made up of Germans who were going to be loyal, you know, that they were trying to remain loyal to the country that and they didn't have the slavery as we know it. So that was a real issue.
I've heard that Germans were too cheap to they wanted to do it themselves.
Well, yeah, that was a thing. By gosh, if you wanted it done, you did it yourself. So many expressions that I recall from the Germans about how the longest job is the one never started. And boy, that makes so much sense. You know, I mean, in plowing that field out there, it looks like it will never get done. And it won't if you don't start. But once you start, by gosh, you wind up finishing the thing.
And Germans are supposed to marry other Germans. That was a really good thing if you could do that.
Yeah, that was true. And again, religion was a big thing back in those days. The separation of the Catholics and the Lutherans. I was born a Lutheran, and again, that was a questionable call when I met Joni, you know, and she was also older than I was, you know, so I figured I had no chance with her because she was a lifeguard. Again, that's how I met her, sitting up on a pole in a swimming suit, you know, and looked pretty good to me. I thought there's no way I'll ever get to know her, and yet it worked at that point on. And well, she has a long story about how her horoscope said that she would meet the man that day, and all day she sat there and nobody came in, you know, and I was playing tennis on a tennis court next door, and I was one of the last people to walk in because I needed a phone to get the call to tell my parents to pick me up from the tennis match. My old buddy had a date and wouldn't take me home. So I went in and called, and Joni said it was like, there he is, I hope, because that's my last point. I think I was the last resort, so to speak, on that day. And that's how we got going.
Well, I think you both got lucky.
Oh, yeah, I am very fortunate, and like I say, just so happy with the way my life has turned out.
Do you want to say anything about what it was like World War II?
Don't know a whole lot about that, to tell you the truth.
What were you doing during that period?
Well, that was basically the 40s. Mm-hmm. Well, I was born in '51.
So you're just very young in terms of the World War II era.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about it.
But life was different here. The German radio station, German newspaper, German church.
Sure. But the the thing that was tough about that particular generation, in regards to my dad for sure, is he had a good buddy, and they decided, let's go join up, and because we're going to serve our country like we're supposed to. So he and Delton French was the guy's name. They went out and, we want to join, buddy. We're ready to go get him. And they looked at him and said, well, any particular group you'd like to be in? And they had made a vow that it didn't matter, but what one was in, the other one was going to be in, you know. So they said, oh, it doesn't matter. We just like to be together. So they looked at Dad and said, well, you're in the Navy. And looked at French and said, you're in the Army. And that's the way they started. And he, like, it's typical Army type deal there. And he said he really enjoyed the naval training and everything. He was one of those, and like I said, he was an exceptional athlete. And in his group, he would always wind up coming in first in any kind of race they had, whether it be a deal like that, because he was born in the country and just a very good athlete. And I wish I'd have got more of that gene from him. But anyway, he told a story about one time he came in, and the sergeant or whatever said, Bonn, what the heck are you doing? You're coming in the middle of this group. You've been messing around on the thing? He said, no, sir. I started with the second group that when they started running. So this was the whole first group that he passed up half of, and had caught up with them. But one of the things that really got him and really changed his life, he wanted to be a veterinarian in his life. He wanted to go on with school, and he had for a while. He'd gone to Shriner, but that's when the war called him and he went. But my grandfather, who was an extremely good communicator, he dealt with a lot of people that sold animals. In other words, he was a pure bullshitter in regard to getting the best that he could from his cattle, the best
A horse
amount.
trader.
Yeah, a horse trader. Yeah, there's so many stories about him, as about letting the guy completely slam the door and everything in a trade.
No deal.
And start driving off, and he would be knocking on their back trunk and saying, whoa, 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 just a minute. You know, he'd let them go that far to see if they were really true on the thing. And oh, there's infinite stories on him. But again, he at that point was getting a little older, and his son was the main provider, his two sons. And so he literally talked the naval guy into saying he was needed so badly at home that they let Dad get out of the Navy and come back and take care of the ranch. And that really hurt Dad. He felt like he was letting down his country, that all his friends would come home from leaving stuff, and that really hurt him. I know he knew it wasn't the right thing to do, and that basically would have allowed him to get a great education through the academic world of the Army.
Mm-hmm.
And
You got the VA benefit
yeah,
and all.
oh geez, the whole world would have been different for everybody in that regard. But like I say, I know he felt so bad. A lot of my mother's sister's husband served over there in the war, and he would always come back with these various. I got an old neat Nazi sword in there that still has a swastika on it. Was one of the things that he came back with, and he's got a book up there about all the little clips that he would send home in his letters to his wife, telling them about Army life. And then Dad would be sitting here at home, you know, just regretting the fact that he wasn't over there and feeling so bad when his friends would come over and talk about all their experiences, so that
But
really was tough on him.
We talk about essential workers today, and that's what he was. He
Yeah.
was an essential worker.
That's
Without
true.
him,
Yeah.
the farm, probably could have not
But that
survived.
that was hard on him. That really was. He,
I guess some of his friends might have died too.
yep.
There's positives and negatives about being involved in something.
Well, you know that story that I showed you about the river, that tape. You remember the song at the end where Mr. Roosevelt, we whipped the leaders of the world. Now you have some shipping space. Send us back home and let the boys back home see Rome. See, that was tough on Dad because basically it was kind of about him, let the guys that haven't been over here. And I'm sure that tore him up, any kind of a song like that. So it was the good things they had down at the river, but all of a sudden, they'd throw in a record like that and didn't even mean it. I mean, they obviously knew what the situation was, that he wanted to go, but he felt bad about that all his life. And to tell you the truth, now don't get me wrong, I wouldn't have wanted to go to Vietnam, but I feel bad about not having ever served my country, because I think I missed out on a big part of life and some great relationships. Boy, the people that you knew in that type of situation, I can't imagine being in Vietnam.
You go in as a child and you come out a man.
Yeah, if you come out.
If you come out.
Yeah, so
Heavy duty.
just amazing.
Let's pause it there
Yes, sir.
and say anything else you wanted to add just while we're sitting here. One of the blessings about doing this is that your grandchildren's grandchildren someday would be taking a look at.
Well, that's hard to imagine, but my whole life's been hard to imagine. Having a son of my own and him having kids of his own. And I so regret that my dad died so early. Garrett, my son, was 1 year old when he died, and he never got to know him.
How old was your father when he died? Right?
53. And we have such neat pictures of him holding Garrett, and just you can see the love in his eyes and just how proud he was of him. And it's such a shame that Garrett never got to know him. I really regret
Well,
that.
he got to know him through you.
Well, I hope so. And I hope the grandkids appreciate me as much as I do them, because they've been a total joy in life to me. I can't express it.
In one of the earlier films that we did, we talked about hunting. And right after we were through talking about hunting, you happened to ask me, what am I most proud of in life? And I, at that point, referenced it back to hunting and told you the story of the wide buck. But in terms of really what I'm proud of in life, one of the things that I am most proud of is the kids' reaction to the teaching that we did, okay? The times that we had together are referenced in our yearbooks over there. So at the end of the year, I always got the kids to write in there what they thought about the class. And if I ever feeling down, I just grab one of those 28 books again that I have over there and look up some of the references that they made and how much they enjoyed the class and it wasn't boring. And hopefully that just session that we had went by extremely quickly for you, because the bell would have rung during that time. We would have been finished. But just to give you a real quick example of how proud I am of one of those things, I just wrote down this one that one young lady had written. Now, this is Amy Hopp, and that's from the year 1987 through 88. And she simply wrote this poem to me. It said, "Mr. Bonn, what will we do? What will we ever do with you? You taught us so much and made it so fun, making little jokes and all your corny puns. You boggle our minds with your tricks and illusions, like the hanger and penny that bought on confusion." We didn't show you that one. We'd work till the bell most every day, but we were having fun, so that made it okay. So thank you so much for teaching us so many things. Your mind's eye concepts and our ears will always ring. And now our sweet ode comes to an end, and we thank you, our good friend. So that's the kind of stuff that they wrote, and it's just amazing. The kids that I thought I was being to the meanest would come up and say, Mr. Bonn, you've been the closest one to a father that I've ever had. And it just tears your heart out. It makes you feel so good. So whenever I'm down, I just grab any one of those books and read a comment by a former student. But in terms of life, what I am most proud of, I think earlier I told you what was the most important thing to me, or you asked who was most important, and I said my father. And that's true. I really respected that man. And he was a great guy. But the thing I am most proud of is my son. And it's the fact that Garrett, my son, has turned out to be almost exactly like my father. He reminds me of my father in so many ways, and what greater tribute could I have to him and to him? So thank you.